So we're at part 2 of the high impact middle manager, and this part is looking at planning for execution, and it's only 2 chapters, and the first part is around having a reality check. And I really like the idea of how will you know where you got to get to if you don't know where you are now. So what this does, this chapter 4, splits in 2 and asks the middle manager to find out where they are now. You know, what does the organisation and what does their boss think of them? And it provides 3 different ways in which that can be done. And the first one, which I know is often the hardest one, but it is probably the most obvious one, is go and ask. And then secondly, it looks at observation. And then thirdly, it looks at using other different types of tools, such as the 360-degree feedback tools. And so I like the idea of finding out where you are now. And it can be quite confronting, and I like that that is addressed in the book. But I think feedback is one of those really important things that so many organisations just ignore or find too difficult. Now, naturally, this is the time for me to put a shameless plug in around my book, Successful Feedback, the 1 simple formula for highly effective feedback, but I wouldn't do that. In all seriousness, feedback is something that so many organisations shy away from when it is such a valuable tool, and when it's handled well, it can provide each individual within the organisation, managers included, with great information, insight into where they're going, help set them up for success and where they need to be heading. So that I really like around this book is that before you get too far into the book, we stop, we take a look, we measure where we are now. Now, the other bit I really like around this chapter is also looking at, it's all well and good to collect all these metrics, but then if you don't communicate them, then what's the point? So the other part around this part of the chapter is around also looking at where the team are at and measuring the team's effectiveness at the moment, as well as the importance of discussing those measurements, not only with the team but with also your managers. So you're communicating upwards so that the organisation knows where they're at and can work out where to go. And I love that around this chapter. Chapter 5, which is the other part of this second part of the book, looks at a strategy or a tool that the manager can use to help for planning for execution. Now, I think it's a bit clunky, and I think it could possibly be a bit complicated, and I'm not a fan of telling someone how to structure something. What I am a fan of is helping someone work out that structure for themselves. Again, it's around ownership. So I like the idea that it provides a structure, because that I would use that as a guiding point for ideas. But essentially what it calls it using the high impact middle management playbook to facilitate peak performance. Now, that's a mouthful in itself. What this really is probably a plan and a structure for a plan. It looks at priorities and projects, short and long-term goals, key financial and non-financial metrics, some productivity and tasks, and also looking at how you can optimize workflow. Now, I think together that is a very all-encompassing procedure or structure, and I like the idea of it. And I like that also they talk about communicating this playbook that they have, but I would not necessarily recommend this exact playbook. What I would recommend this for, as I said, is a idea generation for creating your own structure, and a checklist for making sure everything's included. So I do like that idea of it. And I do really like the idea of making sure it's communicated. Why else do it if you're not going to communicate it and use it as a tool for the whole of the team, as well as to help your boss communicate the effectiveness of your team? And I really like that idea of it. So far so good. I really like knowing where you are now and being able to communicate it, and I like the idea of the structure, or creating a structure that also is communicated amongst the team. So that's part 2. Thanks.